Hello and welcome to this special episode. We had just earlier a podcast episode about soul loss and retrieval. And, this is very much an introductory talk that we had on the topic, and within this video we're gonna go into the topic more in a practical sense as a guide towards how this works. And also very much what I want to highlight specifically already in the beginning is that this is based on my own practice. So this is, a combination of my own research and personal practice. And it should be, in that sense also, highlighted again, that one should not just blindly follow this, one really has to find what works for oneself. And that's very important to note. Do your own research into this further and to really connect with it deeper on a personal level. Because it is very much about, this being a participatory practice, it's something to be implemented within one's life in a personal and meaningful way. So it's very important to, to do that. And then when it comes to this, it's very much birthed out of the personal journey of that I went through. Kind of like was like a slow unfolding of kind of like what I'm going to talk about here, and kind of talked about some of these elements in the Shamanic wheel video that I had made. I think it was a year ago or so, or like over a year ago. And there's these definite elements there, but there's so much more that's added into this video that talk deeper about what's really going on from not just a shamanic but also a psychological lens. And it's very much about the psychological lens of soul loss and how this connects to the shamanic lens then in some way as well. Really the purpose of this video is to help one to understand this from a modern lens, and how this connects to our nervous system and very much our psyche and trauma as a whole, so we can use this guide and the insights that are within this for us as individuals to work towards this sense of wholeness, meaning, and purpose in life. And that's very much the goal of this video, to be a guide towards that. And with that said, I wanna head right into the symptoms of soul loss first. Well, we talked about it already for some degree in the previous introductory talk, and we went into some of those other details, I do want to highlight it again in this video just for the sake of making it easier for everyone. So soul loss. Well, soul loss as a concept comes from shamanic indigenous cultures, and has been by researchers also linked to what we call in the West trauma, or it can be big T or small t trauma. And there's a definite overlap in that. It's just that there's a different way of looking at this from either the shamanic or Western psychological lens. But there's much that we can learn from both the shamanic lens, but also the Jungian lens that I used for this psychological lens. With these insights, we can we can piece something together, something holistic that we can very much utilize in our life to heal ourselves and to, bring these fragments of the soul back together. But yeah, so coming to the signs. Common signs and symptoms that indicate soul loss are, a sense of fragmentation, obviously, chronic feelings of sadness or numbness, difficulty forming intimate connections, or loss of passion and purpose. Which also, below other, symptoms being anxiety, depression, fear, panic, substance abuse, addiction, dissociation, confusion, inability to focus thoughts, lack of appetite, and loss of energy. And I do have to say, that yes, these symptoms can occur occasionally, and go away, and that's kind of like normal for like, our human existence. There's the good, the bad, and the ugly regarding, life as a whole. But it's more, regarding soul loss, very much a more, like a long-term form of anxiety, depression, fear, and these symptoms, so it's not something that's temporarily there, but it's very much chronic. It's something, that one can't really shake, and nothing in the outside world can really, fill this inner hole that we, feel inside. And that's also kind of where I want to bring in the psychological lens as well. Because, what is important to understand with this, that when it comes to, soul loss, we can see it from a Jungian lens, as these different aspects of ourselves that, are fragmented off. But, the thing is that, there's more going on regarding that. It's not just a mental thing, but it also connects to the body and to the nervous system. Which is where this particular psychological lens that I'm going to be talking about, comes in. And you can see here, community building state. That's kind of like how I called it. It's the rest and digest, generally called. But, I called it the community building state just because it's more conducive to building civilization as a whole versus, the other states of being. And you can also see on the right, you can see calm, joyful, energized, curious, open-hearted, connected to others and the world, community building state. For instance, the rest and digest. And that very much is conducive towards exactly that. And similarly, with fight or flight, you can see, the kind of signs or symptoms of that, of being in that particular state. Like, how you can know, like, being in that state. And we know, with that said, there's already an overlap visible with this. Generally, with these different states. But, generally, like I said, we kind of cycle through these states. If a threat happens, we might be in fight or flight state or freeze state. And we come out of these states. But, it's when trauma happens where, things go a little different. And, that gets into the territory of, soul loss and trauma. But, before I want to dive deeper into that, aspect, of being stuck in these states and how this, then also kind of overlaps with soul loss, I want to go a little bit into, these different phases, states, you can call them, as each by each, to go through it and to really talk about, that. Before diving into, being stuck within that state and soul retrieval and the whole, process of really getting out of this state back into this community building state, this rest and digest, so we can, be energized, joyful, open-hearted beings that can connect to the, to the world and others, and can work towards building something together, form a community. So, when it comes down to the community building stage, the state revolves around a sense of security and social belonging. And individuals often liken this sensation to, like I said, having an open heart, fostering a profound connection with others, engaging in meaningful eye contact, and perceiving the faces of their fellow beings. Within this state, emotions of tranquility, elation, vitality, and curiosity, tend to flourish. And, it aligns with the parasympathetic facet of the nervous system's response. When we're immersed in this state, bodily functions such as digestion, immune reactivity, and circulation tend to operate more optimally, while an overall sense of relaxation prevails. But also feelings of stability and rootedness are common with this as well, allowing for a conducive environment to both learn and establish connections. And this state essentially, embodies the harmonious interplay of physiological well-being and interpersonal resonance. Furthermore, also, fostering this state through intentional community-building activities can not only enhance individual mental and emotional states, but also, contribute to the broader societal fabric by nurturing empathy, cooperation, and mutual understanding. Much like, what we're doing in the Fox Den. And, by nurturing such a space where people feel safe, connected, and valued, communities can thus create a positive feedback loop that perpetually reinforces these beneficial attributes. Thus, in turn, this paves the way for healthier individuals, more resilient communities, and a more harmonious world at large. At the same time, there's these other two states as well. I want to go into these as well, to have a bit of an understanding of this of these states before diving into the being stuck within these particular states. So when it comes to the fight or flight state, this marks, the activation of the primal regions of the brain responsible for triggering the survival response. And during this phase, the older parts of our brain, come to the forefront, prompting a series of reactions aimed at ensuring our survival. And emotionally, this phase can manifest as heightened energy and a sense of mobilization, often accompanied by feelings of anxiety and restlessness. And the fight response in this context encompasses emotions like irritability and anger, representing an instinctive preparation to confront challenges head-on. When the fight response is dominant, emotions such as anger, rage, irritation, and frustration surge to the fore. And alternatively, in the flight response, sensations of anxiety, worry, fear, or even panic can emerge, compelling us to move away from perceived threats and seek safety. And from a physiological standpoint, this heightened state results in an increase in blood pressure, heart rate, and adrenaline levels, while digestion processes are relegated to a lower priority, and the pain threshold also diminishes and immune responses become subdued as the body redirects resources towards immediate survival. What is also, interesting to note regarding this is that psychologically, individuals entrenched in a heightened state of fight or flight, tend to exhibit more polarized thinking patterns, often characterized by division into us versus them mental frameworks. And this response is deeply rooted in our evolutionary history, and it activates when the brain senses potential danger or threat. And during this state, the brain focuses on swift decision-making and priming the body for rapid action, often leading to oversimplified and binary thought processes, which is very beneficial, in these ancient situations, where we, as hunter-gatherers, we encounter, for instance, a tiger that wants to eat us, or some other animal like a snake. We have to, be able to react very rapidly. And also between like intertribal things as well, this can manifest as, perceiving situations and individuals through the lens of allies, the us, and the adversaries, the them. But it is worth noting that while the fight or flight response, has evolutionary advantages in certain scenarios, modern life also sometimes triggers this response in situations, where a more nuanced and measured approach would be more appropriate. And recognizing and managing these responses can, contribute thus to improved emotional regulation, better decision making, and more constructive interpersonal dynamics. Because it's then shifting away from from this simplified categorization, the social identity and in-group bias, the threat perception, being very active, the sense of confirmation bias that can play out as well, and in this sense of tribalism. But this is not the only response that there is. There's also the freeze state, or also that is called the shutdown response. And this response characterizes the most primal and ancient aspects of our nervous system. And when confronted, with an overwhelming threat, the shutdown response is thus triggered, representing a deeply, ingrained survival mechanism that's, there for a reason. And this state then brings about feelings of inertia, helplessness, and even despondency. And it can also, give rise to sensations of disassociation or depersonalization, causing individuals to feel disconnected from their own emotions and sense of self. And a pervasive, sense of indifference or feeling of being emotionally turned off may also emerge, accompanied by a sensation of weightiness, fatigue, or immobility. And this impulse really tries to push us to retreat and diminish our presence, avoiding any attention. Physiologically, the body enters a mode of energy conservation during, this shutdown response. The system begins to store more fuel, notably in the form of fat, while insulin activity sees an increase. And simultaneously, the pain threshold becomes elevated, potentially serving as a protective mechanism. And this state is deeply rooted in our evolutionary heritage, designed to help us endure extreme stressors by essentially, shutting down, quote-unquote, non-essential functions. Some examples of these non-essential functions include digestion. During a shutdown response, the body reduces the energy allocated to the digestion process. This can lead to symptoms like decreased appetite, slowed digestion, and potentially even gastrointestinal discomfort. Another one would be the reproductive processes. The reproductive functions are also, often considered non-essential in face of an immediate threat. So, this can result in changes to the menstrual cycle in women and decrease in libido in both men and women. But, it also has, the next one would be the immune responses that it also has a massive effect upon as well. The immune system is vital for long-term health. Certain immune responses might be dialed down temporarily during a shutdown response. And this could lead to increased ability to fight off infections or heal wounds as effectively as usual. We're also, on a brain level, the higher level cognitive processing also starts to get shut down more. Where, these complex cognitive functions such as problem solving, critical thinking, and creative thought may be impaired during the shutdown response. The brain prioritizes more immediate and instinctual reactions over, higher level thinking. With us also having an effect on, social interaction as well. Because engaging in social interactions, building connections with others might be dampened during the shutdown response. And individuals may withdraw from social situations and experience difficulty in connecting with others due to the focus on self-preservation. Also, the metabolic rate changes. The body's metabolic rate responsible for energy expenditure may decrease during the shutdown response. And this is an adaptive measure to conserve energy for immediate survival rather than for sustaining daily activities. Where, finally, also complex motor functions also get dialed down as well. So, activities that require fine motor skills and complex coordination might become less efficient. And, the body prioritizes, the more gross motor movements that are related to to potential escape or self-defense. What I do also want to note, which is important to point out, is that the designation of these functions as, quote-unquote, non-essential is very much, context specific and primarily, related to the body's immediate response to perceived danger or extreme stress. And normally, once the threat diminishes, these functions resume their normal activity levels. Yet, this does not always occur, like in the case of trauma or soul loss. And when it comes to soul loss from a nervous system level, we become either, stuck in this fight or flight state or in this freeze state, or a combination of the both. And that's kind of what I want to go next into, because, understanding this very much also helps us to understand really, what we're, then working towards, when it comes to soul retrieval, like why these particular rituals are done, these particular practices are done, and why this works. And, what we're working towards, with soul retrieval, that it really isn't just the journey that one does, but, there's so much more that comes, to it that needs to be done still after as well. In the shamanic context, this is often done through either, a particular doll or totem item, or a particular symbol, or even coming back for future sessions as well. Because it is very much not a one-time thing at all. You can see here a little joke of mine that I put in, the lizard people ruling the world. You might get it, or not, but yeah. It kind of relates to, to being stuck in the fight or flight state in a more like metaphorical sense, what's ruling the world according to some people. But that aside, I want to continue and dive into, of this sense of being stuck. Bringing it back to soul loss. I said, soul loss occurs when parts of our essence, vitality, and life force become detached or repressed as a result of these, these traumas. And part of this, can be from a modern lens, also be explained through the different psychological states that one can be trapped in, such as, the fight or flight state and the freeze state. I want to go into, the symptoms associated with being stuck in these states. First, what the symptoms regarding being stuck in the fight or flight state, and then regarding the freeze state before going into it. So I know we can see this within ourselves, but also other individuals. And, we can then know and see, what we are stuck in, and that what we can do, later on also to get out of these states, and to, to bring these different parts of ourselves back online, so to say, and to heal from this soul loss, and to heal from, in that sense, from this trauma, and resume our lives in a way, so we can build these connections, and we can connect back to this sense of meaning and wholeness. So, when it comes to the symptoms associated with being stuck in the fight or flight state, this would be, it would be chronic feelings, and, it wouldn't be all of them necessarily, but these are some of them, and it might not even include some others, I might add. So, With that said, you have like symptoms such as anxiety, fear, panic, substance abuse, addiction, overeating, staying busy, disassociation, confusion, inability to focus thoughts, agitation, and irritability. And when stuck in the fight or flight stage, these symptoms are more likely to be prominent. And the fight or flight response, involves heightened arousal and preparation for immediate action in response to perceived threats. And these symptoms, reflect the body's persistent activation of the sympathetic nervous system and ongoing anticipation of danger. And, in a lot of cases, the trauma involved regarding this would basically, put the body in this state. It is either prolonged, like small or big trauma that happens, or a very traumatic event that puts the body in this state, and the body cannot come out of it. Then, when it comes to the symptoms associated with being stuck in the freeze state, these would be, chronic feelings of sadness, numbness, and detachment, specifically detachment from thoughts and emotions, difficulty forming intimate connections, loss of passion and purpose. You could also could see it as a loss of meaning, depression, disassociation, lack of appetite, loss of energy, fawning behaviors, people pleasing, for instance. I want to go a little bit more into the fawning behaviors as well, to just to highlight them a bit better in a bit. Next would be feeling cold, stuck, alone, trapped, and holding the breath or shrinking, in specific moments. Can also be the case, or more in a habitual manner. Speaking here from a personal experience of being stuck in the freeze state for a very long time. The posture can also very much change. So the posture starts to, be more like, like one would be stuck in the freeze state, with the shoulders being more down and forward, and more this posture of like, that signals like, don't hurt me, don't like more of a more down posture that's there to protect the more vulnerable parts of the body, basically. Where vice versa with the fight or flight, they also can have their effects on the posture as well. And when stuck in the freeze state, these symptoms are again more likely to be prominent and to be more chronic. And freeze response, involves a shutdown or immobilization in response, to an overwhelming threat, like I said, where, the body gets put in this mode where it tries to conserve energy and avoid direct confrontation. And these symptoms reflect the body's adaptation, to immobilize and protect itself when fight or flight is not feasible. And generally, when stuck within this state of being, this avoiding of direct confrontation can be, something that can become habitual. Then coming to the 4 signs of fawn behavior that I still want to highlight a bit. This would be, things such as unable to say no, to anyone, since the person doesn't feel they have the right to boundaries and choices, and have come to associate saying no with escalating abuse or trauma. Assuming responsibility for another person's emotional reactions and mood, and also trying to predict and actively avoid behaviors that might upset others. So these behaviors, can also signify that someone might be stuck in this freeze response. So if these behaviors are consistent, then, that could be a good indication for this. And also, in that sense, is a good indication with both that soul loss is very much, there within the individual as well. when stuck in that, because there's these different parts then that are not there anymore. Well, they are there, but we really have lost the connection to them in that particular state of being that we're in. Because very much when we experience trauma, the intensity of the event can be very overwhelming, and to protect ourselves, we may just disassociate or detach, from these parts of us that we that were directly affected. And these, fragmented aspects of our soul, from a shamanic lens, retreat to a hidden realm, often referred to as the lower world or the underworld, seeking thus refuge from the pain and distress. And often, these parts of us are guarded by spirits, both negative or protective, who ensure that this part stays away from our conscious awareness. And from a Jungian lens, this can be seen as, complexes that exist within the personal unconscious, which is the realm of the mind-born spirits. I talked about it in this one talk regarding, Vervaiki, for instance. And the collective unconscious, could instead be seen as the archetypal realm of the deities, land spirits, and other important and powerful spirits, that the shaman is working with. But before, going into soul retrieval itself, and how we can get out of these states of being, and get these pieces of our soul back together, and go on this journey towards wholeness. I want to go a little bit into complexes and really the importance of them. You can see here ego, family, religion, society, and there's these influences on the ego, and this also forms complexes, both positive and negative. And regarding the negative ones specifically, there's the ones that are formed through trauma, which also have an influence on our behavior, the dreams and symbols as well. But there's also from the archetypal layer, from the collective unconscious, also influences on behavior and dreams and symbols as well. But the complex can sit on top of this archetypal layer of behavior, and can cause this sense of distortion of the healthy behavior. And you can also see symbols, images, and emotions and behavior surrounding the archetype, and the complex surrounds that in some sense, and has this core belief as well. And in that sense, complex is a collection, of thoughts, feelings, attitudes, and memories that focus on a single concept, or core belief as well. And the more elements attached to the complex, the greater its influence on the individual. And the complex is, created for the purpose of ego defense sometimes as well. So a complex can have both positive and negative aspects, and can influence a person's behavior and decision making either in a positive or negative way. And complexes can be seen as parts of the psyche that are autonomous and have a life of their own, which is very important to realize. They're not just these parts that are there, that are just there in the unconscious. They're active. But what I also want to point out, however, it's not always the case that a complex is undesired or seen as negative, as it can also serve a protective or adaptive function for the individual. It's only when it becomes excessively dominant or interferes with a person's life in a negative way that it is considered problematic. It is especially, due to trauma or when an archetypal need is not met, that a complex can form, as a reaction to the environment. An archetypal need is like an instinctual need of our being, like a emotional need, an instinctual need. What I also want to point out is that complexes, when they run out of fuel, because they fuel themselves on by entering the sphere of ego consciousness, and they need like psychic energy, libido, to keep themselves alive. So I know they're active, and they try to consistently come back in, and to try to enforce certain behaviors and certain reactions that come out of that to keep this complex going. But when complexes run out of fuel, they become more annoying and then try to get more fuel. And through awareness, we can slowly starve them. So it tends to become worse before it gets better. Really, speaking from experience here. Though they are very sneaky and will try to survive and keep themselves alive. And what also needs to be said is that they are also tied into the same physiology as ego consciousness, and can affect the psyche and emotions as well. So when they are running out of psychic energy, this will start to affect the psyche as if ego consciousness is in distress. Well, it really is the negative complex dying off, and that is what is in distress. So it's sometimes very difficult to know really what's going on, but so it can really be the psychological complex instead. The process of soul retrieval aims to restore the lost or fragmented aspects of our soul, and by embarking on shamanic journeys through altered states of consciousness, induced by drumming, rattling, or trance-like states, we can connect with these hidden realms where the soul fragments reside. And guided by our spiritual allies and guides, we can navigate these realms to locate and retrieve the lost soul parts. And it's also, crucial to approach this inner exploration with self-compassion and self-love as well. But what I do also want to, next to that, point out is that when it comes to the spiritual allies and guides, it's it's very much the archetypal layer underneath that one is tapping into these archetypal beings in the collective unconscious that are beyond personal consciousness, and one has to be very aware of it, because complex very much can trick one into believing that it's actually helping one. Well, it's not. And there's a real need to be aware of that, to really be aware of that, that ability of these complexes to trick oneself. And one really knows, with these specific examples, you can really see how to know when one really is working through it, or if one is just being tricked. Generally, when one is actually working through it, I cannot say it already now, it's not all like love and light and rainbows and butterflies. It's very much going into the underworld, literally going into the underworld, into very uncomfortable emotions and uncomfortable memories to some degree as well. And to really, process these emotions, process a lot, and it's not easy to go on these journeys. The shamanic journeys are difficult, very difficult, and I do want to say, this is not something lightly to be taken. You shouldn't do this like it's like, oh yeah, I can do this. Like, no, this is serious business, very, very, very much so. It's like, sure, when it comes to interacting with the spirits and can be playful, and one shouldn't be always too serious. But when it comes to this, it's a serious business, very much so. You can't take this too lightly. So with that said, I want to dive into my own specific practice a little regarding soul retrieval. So yeah, coming to this, I want to first go into the different steps that I go through, and then I want to give a specific example as well regarding, a journey. So regarding step 1, first, I analyze what it is what I want to work on, and I do this from a Jungian lens. But any framework does the trick. What's the most important thing is that you have a framework. And the purpose of this is to actually, dig deep into oneself, to look into the personal history of oneself, to look into to spot these complexes, to spot the trauma. Like, what are we working on? We can't just go in there without knowing anything. Like, well, we could, but it will just take a lot longer to figure things out. And very much this is, to help formulate a clear intention, and also I do feel it helps to prepare emotionally for the journey as well, because you have more of an idea of like, well, what are we working with, and what kind of emotions can be linked to this, and to have some idea like, okay, what are we getting ourselves into. And it's very important to have this kind of idea, and not to take this in a very lighthearted way. And step 2 would be to set a clear intention, and it needs to be very concise in that manner, because it is also something that later then also gets communicated, or like that I communicate to my spirit guides as well, where I'm talking to them and explain the exact thing what I want to do. It's like, this is the thing that I want to do, and then I release this intention to the spirits, and I see what their response is. Sometimes they are initially already like, no, not right now. Then I'm like, fine, I'll listen to that. And it's important to listen to what they say. Other times they're just like, yeah, go ahead. And they can also say how to do it as well. And it's important to very much listen to it. And also, if needed, it's important to, get a teacher as well. For instance, Nicholas Bruce Wood and his community are very valuable regarding this as well. So, if you really feel like I need a teacher regarding this, or someone, from a shamanic lens, like, check them out. They know what they're doing. And similarly, on my Patreon page, there's also, something that I offer as well, more regarding the curious kind of traditions, which links to the dancing and chanting that I also do in these rituals as well. And just make sure to check that out, and also check out Three World Shamanism and the linked community to really deepen your understanding of this before deciding to dive deeper into this and be like, okay, I'm just gonna do it, because it's good to have a good framework there first before diving into this. So yeah, before I do the journey, then when it comes to it, and I have this could say like this the sense of like, yes, it is the right time to do this, and this is how I'm going to do it, and it's like been like communicated beforehand. I first dance and chant really to get into a more relaxed state, and I'm gonna go deeper into that, the significance of dancing and chanting itself as well, what this does regarding the state of being that one is in later on as well, because it is an important aspect of what I do, and why these journeys have the effect that they have. So when it comes then to step 3, I very much make sure to communicate with my guide about my exact intention, and ask them to guide me. And I when I before I go into the journey, I go there into the woods, I have my shamanic drum with me, and then I communicate about that after the dancing and the chanting, and building this connection to the drum spirit and to the spirits. And then before I drum, I make sure to really release any control over the journey or how it is supposed to play out. I let the from a Jungian, you could say, the unconscious speak itself. Where with step 4, I do the journey itself. Let it play out, and then see what comes up, and be also proactive in the journey. I generally end up following the spirit guide, and face what I need to face, and rescue what is needed to rescue, or do what needs to be done. I really want to with this also stress, don't be an observer but a participant. You have to participate. You have to ask questions if necessary. You have to act. Be active in this. To go around, to be an active participant. And it's also, important that during the journey, which is step 5, you let yourself feel what needs to be felt. Don't analyze during the journey. Don't have your thinking brain come in and try to analyze it or try to rationalize it, or like, it's very important to get that to quiet that part of the mind. And regarding that, like mindfulness practice or Qigong, for instance, is very helpful regarding that, to get that thinking brain out of the way, because it really can mess with the journey if that starts to come in. It's really about like to focus on the journey itself and let it unfold. And then when it unfolded and everything is done what needed to be done, generally, the 6th step would be, to thank the spirit guides for their help, to really do that. Another thing that I do want to add that I kind of forgot to mention is also that part of the dancing and chanting also is to create a sacred space and where I do the work as well. And the specific place that I choose, I normally either go to a significant spot like a sacred site that I know is sacred, or I let myself be guided towards a particular spot that that is conducive to, for the journey itself. But, at the end of the journey, I kind of like end, this sense of sacred space that I'm in by, to again make an intentional connection with the spirit guides and giving of thanks to them. And, next to that also afterwards, the feeding of, offerings or, well, in this case, incense that I generally do. Where, finally then, step 7 and 8 would be, something I do that is more like, combined in my way, but, doesn't have to be, which is, I write the journey down in as much detail as I can, soon after the journey, to really write everything down, all the little details, everything that one can remember about it. Because, this very much helps to create a feedback loop and, ground the journey into your being as well, to really write it down and treat it as something sacred, as something important, because it is. Where, finally, in that sense, in the final sense with step 8, then I analyze the journey from a Jungian lens. I interpret what happened in it, like what happened, what occurred. Like I interacted with these spirits, these beings. They said this to me, or they did these actions. What does it mean? Are there any lessons to be learned? And I also then incorporate these lessons into my life as well. Or, with some journeys, for instance, I analyze, what does this mean? Like, what's the impact of this? How does this relate to the trauma that I'm working on? Is there anything that this reveals more, that can shed light onto it, or sheds light onto, like, what do I need to work on, or what do I need to do? And these explorations are very much, centered on the individual, and not as much regarding the shamanic work that's also done regarding the land spirits, the spirits of place that happens as well. It is very much more individual focused and healing focused, and aspect of it that I use. And also what I do want to say is that this practice, though it contains shamanic elements, is my own practice and is not from any indigenous tradition itself. And is basically, created by me doing a lot of research regarding the Korean traditions, the mystery schools, the Jungian psychology, depth psychology, and to together with that and insights from shamanism, try to put this together. But I do want to say this is not from shamanic tradition, so it's my own creation. But now coming to the shamanic journey example, within this example, I met up with Carl Bhairava, and Rooney the fox spirit, after setting the intention of finding the herd anima half, anima being a Jungian term. And when things shifted for me, because for me, when I journey, I see things in a visual manner. We were, I saw that we were in a rainy jungle with, kids laughing and pointing at an empty chair, which I, in hindsight, could see, was symbolizing invalidation. But, in the journey, I was not analyzing anything. I just let it play out and interacted, in the way that I would do. I just followed the spirit guide, the fox spirit, with, called Bhairava, this Hindu deity being there in the journey as well. It's like a more protective being there within the journey. But after this rainy jungle with the kids laughing and pointing at an empty chair, there was this path, then with bushes on both sides where kids were being torn apart by raptors. Which later on, I linked to, fight or flight state of being. And finally, I got to a cave guarded by a Wendigo. The complex in question, linked to feelings of emptiness. But also, other things I went through that I want to get into a little bit later. And, it ran off upon seeing Bhairava, who then, instead guarded the cave entrance. Where, I then went inside of the cave and I saw, the herd anima, or this feminine figure lying in a fetus position, bruised, muddy, and shaking. And I then, approached her, but she got scared. Till way deeper in the cave, she finally turned around to hug me and cry. Where, I interacted also within the journey. I spoke to her. I tried to, create a connection to this part of myself. The emotional part of my being. And to try to, to really build that, try to build that connection back up. Where, later on, after the journey, I continued to, I took her out of this cave. And then I continued, working with this part of myself. But, a little bit more of an analysis that can be done, regarding this journey, which is a personal journey for me, and, kind of what I've, partly of what I went through. Well, so confronting the Wendigo within the journey, very much also symbolizes me facing the emotional wounds associated with, narcissistic abuse. And Wendigo symbolism aligns with the dynamics, often associated with narcissism, including manipulation, emotional neglect, and a focus on self-centered interests. Where, the Wendigo serves as a guardian of the suppressed aspects, symbolizing the influence of narcissism and the scapegoat role within family dynamics, where the empty chair symbolizes the feelings of invalidation and being bullied. And the raptors, with the kids being torn apart, symbolizing, like I said, the fight or flight nature of the environment. Where finally, the state of the anima and the journey symbolized the state of the emotional psyche and the effects of these, traumatic experiences. But, this journey itself is not the end of the process, only the beginning. But before, I want to quickly go into the significance of dancing rituals and what they can do for us psychologically. I already hinted earlier regarding that, dancing and chanting. And I want to go into specifically the dancing aspect of this. So when it comes to dancing, I want to specifically speak about the chorus and archetype rituals that I have looked into deeply. Because, dance plays a significant role in both the chorus tradition and the archetype tradition. It holds a deep connection, to primal instinctual energies in the collective unconscious as well within these rituals. which makes it especially interesting. Within these rituals, engaging in dance, individuals tap into archetypal patterns and express them through movement, integrating body, mind, and spirit. Well, dance was also seen as a civilizing aspect, bringing order and harmony to society. And it fosters, in the ancient sense, a sense of unity and connection among the participants. When it, comes to both soul loss and, being stuck in these different physiological stages, these states, and dancing, it very much also, connects to what is called the shake-off response within animals. Because, in the animal world, animals shake off the freeze response caused by a life threat. And when animals suffer trauma, it has been documented that they will literally shake it off, which helps the animal discharge the energy of the traumatic event. Though, this doesn't always technically have to be the case. But, in humans, if one is unable to shake off the trauma, it may evolve into mental or physical illnesses. And humans also shake off trauma, but for some, the shake-off response isn't available, thus the trauma is held in the body. And it can be caused by trauma itself as well, when it's especially when it is very overwhelming, when we can, get stuck in this response, this freeze response, and we cannot shake off the trauma, or in the sense of, our body can't release the intensity of the event. And in that sense, the problem comes when something prevents the nervous system from completing its natural, survival-based response. And in these cases, the experience can become stored in the body, resulting in mental or physical illness or both. And these issues get lodged in our tissues and our brains as well. After a traumatic event, one that represents a threat to personal safety, the brain and body are transformed. The threat evokes a physical and emotional reaction in the person experiencing the event, which activates our sympathetic nervous system, also known as fight or flight, a necessary and important survival response. And after the trauma, it remains activated, keeping the body and mind on high alert. In these cases, where we get stuck in the fight or flight response or this freeze response. And thus, the brain and nervous system, in that sense become stuck in the trauma and are rewired in a way that makes healing a challenge. And in that sense, from a shamanic lens, we can then start to speak about soul loss. And in a threatening situation, the brain and body are usually able to, alleviate this reaction and shift back to its normal functioning. In those cases, it does not occur. Because, with trauma, the stress and hormones, activated in the brain are stuck in survival and, do not restore. So, the brain remains primed for threat and keeps the survivor in its reactive state, ultimately, affecting other brain structures to react accordingly. And like I said earlier in this video, has these effects on the brain and how we relate to the world, and creates all of these symptoms that I talked about earlier. And in that sense, shaking but also dancing, both as a physical response and a therapeutic practice, acts as a dynamic antidote to the persistent survival mode in which trauma can, ensnare us. And this somatic experience taps into the body's innate wisdom, allowing it to discharge the pent-up stress hormones and tension that have become immobilized. And the rhythmic, dancing or shaking embodies recalibration, releasing the hold of the freeze response and guiding the nervous system back towards, a sense of balance. And polyvagal theory, formulated by Dr. Stephen Porges, sheds, further light also on the intricate interplay between the nervous system, emotions, and social engagement as well. And in that sense, trauma can, disrupt the autonomic nervous system's regulation, leading to a chronic state of hyperarousal or disassociation, such as that what we talked about regarding, being stuck in the fight or flight, or, the freeze response. And dancing and shaking, engage the vagus nerve, the main communicator between the brain and the body, in a way, that encourages its down-regulation mode. And, this mode is associated with a state of safety, fostering relaxation and connection. So this mode of community building, how I called it. And by stimulating the vagus nerve through, rhythmic movement, individuals can reestablish a sense of safety and recalibrate their nervous system's response to stress. And in that sense, neuroplasticity is also involved within this process as well, which is, is the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself, which, plays a vital role in trauma recovery. The traumatic experiences can, create neural pathways that perpetuate, hypervigilance and emotional distress. And, dancing and shaking introduce novel, neural pathways, shifting the brain's focus from survival-oriented responses to adaptive processing. And as individuals, engage in these practices, they invite the brain to reframe traumatic memories and emotions, integrating them into a larger narrative of growth and resilience instead. And dancing and shaking, also provide a non-verbal outlet for the expression of emotions that might be difficult to articulate. Trauma can invoke a range of intense feelings that remain unprocessed when held solely within the mind. And through rhythmic movement, these emotions, can find a channel of release, reducing their potency and allowing for emotional regulation. And this release is particularly relevant in cases where the freeze response has kept emotions and memories locked away. And engaging in dance and shaking next to that also, provides individuals with a tangible sense of agency in their healing process as well. Trauma, can lead to feelings of helplessness and loss of control. So by actively participating in these practices, individuals, reclaim a sense of ownership over their bodies and emotions. And this empowerment also, fuels a shift from a victim mentality to one of resilience and strength, essential components of the healing journey. And, when it comes to this also, I talked regarding this also about, the Koreos tradition, specifically linked to Dionysus and very much, these hunter-gatherer rituals as well within the video called Unleashing the Ecstatic Primal Energy of Transformation. And I also, highly recommend looking into this as well, because these practices, which I also do, very much also help in processing trauma, in getting oneself out of this freeze response. Now, when it comes to wind horse, this is also something that I practice the cultivation of. And in shamanism, wind horse is often associated with the shaman's ability to harness the power of the elements, including wind, water, fire, and earth. And the shaman uses this power to connect with the spirit world, to communicate with the spirit of ancestors and nature, and to perform healing rituals. And wind horse is also, associated with the shaman's personal power and strength. And when it comes to both healing and restoring vital energy, in the realm of shamanic traditions, the concept of wind horse is very much, important, the cultivation of this. And it also very much links to the restoration of the soul, because wind horse is seen as a symbol of the human soul. And it is, representing the deepest essence of an individual. And it signifies the integration of opposites and the harmony between various aspects of the psyche. Wind horse, in that sense, can be associated with the idea of the Jungian self, which encompasses the totality of an individual's conscious and unconscious aspects. And the practices connected to cultivating wind horse, such as Qigong, breathwork, and yoga, for instance, help to strengthen the connection between both the left and right hemisphere of the brain, through strengthening the corpus callosum and the limbic system. But also, between the neocortex, linked to our intellectual side, but also the brainstem, linked to our instinctual side. Connecting deeper into the nervous system and other related parts of the brain, and there's also the body. And it is this strengthening of the connection between these parts of the brain and the connection to the body, that really re-embeds the individual, and with it, on a spiritual level, their soul into the body and into, present moment awareness. And in that sense, what we're doing with dancing as well, is reconnecting to this sense of vitality that wind horse also represents. And in that sense, wind horse practice, which involves cultivating the life force energy, and integrating opposites, combine. And in that sense, wind horse practice, which involves cultivating the life force energy and integrating opposites, combined with shamanic journeying practices, creates a powerful synergy. This integrated approach, facilitates the harmonization of body, mind, and spirit, and enables a deeper exploration of the psyche. Where also wind horse practice prepares the ground by creating a strong foundation with the body and mind, while shamanic journeying opens the door to deeper spiritual exploration and soul retrieval. Where the integration of these practices allows for a more profound and comprehensive transformation. And very much also, helps in, the bringing together of these different parts of the soul as well, next to also allowing us to tap into the, into the body, into the stored trauma, and to help us to get out of this freeze response, out of this fight or flight response, into this community building state, this rest and digest state, so that we can, work through these emotions. Once the fragmented soul parts are located, we have done the soul retrieval through this journey, it then becomes about engaging in a process of negotiation and healing. There's a real need to establish a relationship with these soul parts and to, communicate with the soul fragments, understanding the reasons for their retreat and addressing any lingering traumas or unresolved emotions. But, at times this also means to confront or otherwise negotiate with the spirits that keep these soul parts from being able to come back to us. Because, sometimes we fight these spirits, sometimes we don't, and we just retrieve this soul part. But, there can be still these spirits there, these complexes. There can be sense of negotiation there, but also sometimes it actually boils down to actually just fighting it. And working on, slowly, like starving it of its life force, of the complex in this case. So it slowly withers away, and it goes away, and the archetypal expression that's underneath it can rise up and come to life instead. In a shamanic lens, the shaman's job is to create a safe and nurturing environment for these soul parts to reintegrate into the individual's consciousness, fostering a sense of wholeness and restoring the vital life force energy as well. Where, later it very much becomes about the process of building a relationship with these different aspects within ourselves. And this is also something that, we need to continuously do. For myself, active imagination very much, plays a big part in this. So this sense of the round table, how I approach it as well, where I interact with these different aspects within myself, and then I try to, find a balance between these different aspects of myself, so that then I can work with their energies and work with them and find a way how they can be present within myself without interfering with the healing that is necessary in the sense of processing of the emotions. But I don't do just this, but also it boils down to, working with these different archetypal energies as well. You can see here in this mandala, wind horse, for instance, Artemis, Apollo, Odin, Bhairava, Freya, Athena, and all these different figures. And, I'm working with these different archetypal energies within myself as well, next to, these parts of the soul that I bring back and brought back within myself that I have been, working with. So it's kind of like both happening at the same time. You work with the mind-born spirits in some sense, but also, to heal from the trauma, these different soul parts that you work on reintegrating. But at the same time, you also work with these collective unconscious archetypal figures that can be seen in the lens of deities and land spirits and other such figures that one works with to help in in this healing journey, in this healing process. And to also what I do is to tap into these archetypal patterns that are associated with them as well, and to reintegrate this within my own being. And, making a mandala like the one you see here is, for instance, one way how you can interact with it. But, there's other ways as well. And for instance, I have like a little altar space for myself as well that I use, where I burn incense, for instance. But there's many other ways how one can connect with these archetypal energies, including active imagination. And I have a video regarding that as well, which I can put in the description of this video as well. But when it comes to the next part here now, which I call wolf medicine in the old shamanic wheel, it very much is about, it's very much about reparenting oneself, keep cultivating awareness and learning, ways for oneself to get outside, and learning ways to get oneself out of fight or flight and freeze states. Because the thing is that even though one, rescues a particular soul part, this does not mean that the journey is over. This is actually just, like I said, the start of the journey. And the reintegration process is something that is, can be more drawn out. Doesn't have to be, but can be. And particular things can still, because, these parts that we're reintegrating are still very, you can say like, they've been wounded, so they're very sore. So something can lead to this part to try to retreat again, or to, become less present. And there's always this need to cultivate this awareness and to, reparent oneself, but also to keep this connection up and to consistently reassure this soul part that it's safe, that it's protected, and that, to keep that connection up. So, slowly it can be reintegrated, and and this takes time. And and it's important to incorporate this also, practices such as breath work, dancing, qigong, singing, yawning, which is a weird one, but yes, yawning actually works to get you out enough to be able to do these other things. But it's to get oneself out of these responses again, to be able to do that, and then also work on this relationship with this part of the soul that one tries to reintegrate. Because if one gets into this kind of fight or flight and freeze response again, one can lose connection again to these particular parts. And then it's about reassuring and trying to reintegrate this part. And it's a long process, that doesn't get resolved right away. It's something that takes time. And when it comes to wolf medicine, it's very much also about looking at one's behaviors and, with the sole purpose of rewiring these behaviors to healthy forms. And in that sense, reparenting is, also about giving our adult self what we didn't get in childhood, And in that sense, children depend on their parents, for a whole lot more than just their basic needs, such as food, clothing, and shelter. For example, we need our parents to teach us how to set limits for ourselves, how to identify, express, and manage our emotions, how to soothe ourselves, and how to treat ourselves with compassion. And, we often think that we should just innately have these social emotional skills, but, these are learned behaviors. And reparenting ourselves starts by identifying what we need, so our needs, and what we didn't learn in childhood. What emotional needs weren't met as well. So we are there for ourselves in the way that, for instance, our parents weren't. but this also, extends to general behavior of relating to oneself and others, to overcome, the core belief of the complexes involved when, if necessary, and replace them with healthier ones. For instance, speaking here from my personal experience, when it comes for the emotional suppression complex, this could involve, core beliefs such as emotions are weakness, or expressing emotions will lead to rejection or criticism, where we would replace them with beliefs such as emotions are valid to express, for instance, and other, healthier versions of the negative core beliefs that we are challenging. It is, though, important when challenging the complex to build up a core belief that transcends the duality of the complex. So both the negative and positive pole of the complex. So the black and white thinking that comes with the complex. And then again, like I said, figuring out the core belief through looking back at our personal history and what we went through is generally really helpful. Next to seeing the pattern that plays out as well, in real life. And that is, all the thinking that is really needed. Ruminating on the trauma or the memories is not processing the trauma. That is, really, what the next slide is about. Processing the trauma. And in that sense, really emotional processing. When it comes to soul loss, and these parts of the soul that got lost because of, the trauma, and, we have now retrieved back, and, they're there, and we're working on this process of reintegration. There's also a lot of emotions connected to this as well, next to memories. These parts of us that got split off, and, we lost connection to because we were stuck in this sense of fight or flight, or this freeze response. That's a very important part is when it comes to the reintegration process is very much this emotional processing. And when it comes to this, one technique one could try is journaling about one's feelings and thoughts, related to particular events, for instance. Writing about your memories, regrets, and any unresolved emotions. But, and not to do just that, but, because it can sometimes bring up buried feelings that one has, that one might have been avoiding. And, like I said, the goal here is not the writing down and thinking, but to tap into the underlying repressed emotions, to, connect to that emotion. And it's important to, when that emotion then comes up, to connect to it, follow that emotion, lean into it. And then let yourself feel it. Don't think about it further. Let yourself feel it. Let it come up. Which also kind of goes into this other technique, which is called emotional flooding, where you intentionally expose yourself to the emotions you've been avoiding. For example, you could set aside time to look at pictures of the past, listen to music that reminds you of the past, or visit a place that you associate with it. But it is important to have support in place before attempting this technique, as it can be overwhelming and very triggering. And emotional flooding, is a technique used to help process emotions, by intentionally exposing oneself to triggers or reminders of past experiences that have been repressed or suppressed. I do want to say, though, even though it can be difficult to do emotional flooding if you do not have any, physical reminders or not living in the same country anymore, in this case, what you could do is to rely on your imagination to create a mental image or, scenario that can help you to experience these emotions you're trying to process, to really tap into these memories, these fragments of memories that one has, or these memories that has been that have been rediscovered through this soul part coming back. And regarding how to do this, would really start with finding a quiet and comfortable place to sit and close your eyes, take some deep breaths and try to really relax your body. You can't do this if you're stuck in fight or flight or in this freeze response. You have to get out of that response first. And once you are in this relaxed state, then you can try to recall a specific memory or event that is associated with the emotions you want to process. And you really want to use all of your senses, to recreate the memory in your mind as vividly as possible. Imagine yourself back in that time and place, and to really try to relive the experience in as much detail as possible. And as you do this, pay attention to the emotions that come up as well. And really don't try to, suppress or push them away, but instead allow yourself to fully feel and experience them. And you can, continue this process for as long as you feel comfortable. And try to do it regularly, to help process and release these stuck emotions. Though I do have to add, again, that Qigong, for instance, is also very useful in this. As it allows one to bring up these buried emotions, because the wind horse you cultivate pushes up all of these buried emotions, Similarly with breathwork as well, it can start to very much push them. Can very much push them higher and higher up into conscious awareness. And with that, and with the emotional processing, then also comes the slow reintegration of the soul part of the part that got split off. And once you've processed these emotions, they can really start to become more and more a part of one, and one regains this sense of vitality, purpose, and meaning. And slowly start to also, from a Jungian lens, also reconnect back to the self, to the Jungian self, and with that, back to the soul. And finally, with that said, before ending this video, support and emotional support is very much important in this, in this healing journey. And, within the Foxden community, we have this thing called support circle, where, we come together once a month, or maybe, sometimes less, it depends on the situation, or sometimes more, to, come together for this sense of mutual support, where we witness each other and we work towards being our authentic selves. In such an supportive environment is also very much needed for, this kind of healing journey. And so with that said, I want to end this episode and thank you all for listening. And maybe see you all. See you all maybe in the Foxden, or or again in a new video or live stream. Okay. With that said, I would say, see you next time.